The second round for David was price perfect. I'm Teekosey, and this is with just 15 defeats. Teekosey here, and welcome to another round of With Just 15 Defeats. In this show, we're going to be discussing David Price's recent KO victory at Goodison Park. So thanks for joining me on this video. I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time to find out my opinion on the fight and the heavyweight division. So if you've got any comments, you know where to find them below. I will get back to you as soon as possible. Please give me a thumbs up if you like this content, and also click the subscribe button if you want to find out more. So David Price, he wins in the second round with a KO victory. What we've come to expect from David Price when he wins. So I was really pleased with this fight. I'm a big fan of David Price. I think he's got a lot of potential. We know he has a number of weaknesses, but then a lot of great athletes, sportsmen, they're great at something, but they have a weakness. They have a weakness, and that's what makes them human. And that's kind of like the success story. And it kind of you get behind these sort of guys because you can relate to them. And I think that might be, I don't know, might be a little bit of an issue with Anthony Joshua as time progresses. But anyway, David Price, very quick fight, ended in the second round. Now, the major talking point really is the fact that David Price has put on a bit of weight. Weighed in at 275-ish. Looks so much better. Now, I spoke about this in length in my prediction video. I spoke about it in previous videos about David Price. And to be honest, I've been speaking about it to anyone who will listen to me, that David Price needs to pack on the weight. For years, and I've been saying this for about 5 years, that David Price needs to pack on the weight, because when you look at his midsection, it just did not look right. And Dave Caldwell, he kind of summed it up, and he kind of basically said he didn't look right. He's a massive unit. He's a massive unit. So 275 is just perfectly fine. And when I started watching this, when I'm watching the fight, you start looking at it, his body just looked so much more regularized for the size he is. 6'9", 6'9". Now, I know you might say Tyson Fury, he's also about the same height, and when he came in for the Klitschko fight, he was sub 250. Sub 250. David Price has been campaigning sub 250 for his entire career prior to this fight. But the difference is that Tyson Fury, when he came in for that fight, it looked right. He didn't look thin, didn't look drained, didn't look too big. It looked right for his frame, right? David Price, the frame, the central section never looked right. The pecs and all that midsection. It was always a concern for me, and I always thought that maybe the way that he was possibly, I don't know, that he's possibly draining himself down to fit a size that he thought was right. Okay, and that could have been contributing to his stamina issues. I don't know, but anyway, he looked so much better. He looked a bit beefy. He had a bit more weight. Everything looked more regularized, as I've said before. So I was well chuffed by that. I was well chuffed to see that he kind of made the decision to up his size finally, right? But what did I say about this fight in the prediction video? I said that the opponent, Pejsar, I said that he was reasonable. I said he was basic. I said he was limited. I said he was going to have a high guard. I said there wasn't really going to be any kind of volume of punches, but I said he was going to be game. But there was going to be a massive size differential, and I said this was going to be an easy stoppage, in line with the sort of stoppages we came to expect from David Price prior to Tommy Thompson era. So when he went on a run of sparking out all of those British guys in relative ease, I said this was just going to be another one of those. And that's what we got. It was a complete mismatch. The guy was small. I think he weighed in at 220, but he's another one of these guys that realistically, I don't know, it's possible that he could probably campaign at cruiserweight. So if he really tried, he could campaign at cruiserweight. Whereas our man David Price, as Dave Caldwell said, he's a massive unit. So the size differential was ridiculous, right? But the actual 4.5 minutes that we saw of this fight, there was negatives and positives that I noticed, right? Now the negative was that early in the second round, Pejsar was closing the distance with ease, and I don't know whether Price was allowing him to do this, but he was closing the distance, and this was after he'd already been dropped in the first round. So he obviously thought, I need to go for it. So in the second round, Pejsar was closing really, really quickly and throwing wild swinging punches overhand, and he got Price on the ropes, and he went for it. There was an onslaught, a barrage of punches, and that to me, on the face of it, seems like a negative, that Price wasn't able to maintain the distance. As we said, he's big, and in the first round, his jab was firing out quite well. He was showing his boxing skills. He was moving about, seemed relatively light on his feet, particularly considering the extra weight, which shows that he can take that extra weight. But yeah, he wasn't able to prevent Pejsar from closing the distance, which is negative. Now, I don't know whether he did that on purpose, whether it was part of the game plan, to allow Pejsar in close to test him out, because that's what you need. You need in-fight experience to see whether you can take these guys. And maybe he thought, this guy doesn't have any power. It's like I discussed in the preview, that he's unlikely to knock out Price, despite the fact that anything's possible. And he thought, let him get him close, and it gives him a chance to show some of the defensive works. And this is possibly, I'd like to think so, this is what Dave Caldwell's been working on, David Price, for a while, the defensive side. Because what we did see from David Price was, in the limited time that we had, was that he was covering up. He was lifting that hand up and kind of preventing the shots that came in from Pejsar, and Pejsar was hitting the gloves. He was kind of holding that glove tight to his face, which was good to see. And we also saw Price holding. Now, we all know the great Wladimir Klitschko is the master of the holding down, the pulling, the pushing, all that stuff. And yes, from the sweet science perspective, we don't see it, but the fact is, from his perspective, from being a winner, from being able to take away someone's offence, we know it works because Klitschko did it for years and years and years. So, and I spoke about this. Like a lot of people spoke about that. Klitschko that David Price should be taking a bit out of Klitschko's book, because there's a lot that he can take from it, and he hadn't done it to date. Now, he showed a little bit in this fight, the holding, and the covering up. So that was good to see. So it's good to see that David Caldwell has been possibly working. I like to think of it. So there was positives, negatives, and then ultimately he sparked the guy out, and he started getting to his feet, but the referee just stopped it because it wasn't really worth going any further, and the fact that David Price could have seriously injured the poor guy. So I think it was a good fair stoppage. Now, David Price, where does he go from here? Who's his next opponent going to be? He's been talking about, in the lead up to this fight, that he wants his IBF ranking reinstated because of the Tepper situation, and he thinks that he should be top 10 IBF ranking. That is what it is. I think the problem, because we know that David Price has these weaknesses. He's been knocked out before, therefore we know he can be knocked out again. It's always going to be playing on his mind. It's always going to be playing on matchmakers' minds, the fans' minds, that he can be knocked out. So in choosing an opponent, this is what's going to be playing on their mind. So do they put him in with a risky opponent where the reward might be a bigger fight down the line, or do they keep putting him in with low-level guys and try and persuade someone like Anthony Joshua to go in for an all-British clash? I have a feeling that we might see Joshua versus David Price as Joshua's next defence. I've just got a feeling. I've got a feeling it's a fight they can sell. I wouldn't be surprised if David Price does fight another guy in the next, 6 to 8 weeks, who's it could be anyone. No one of real relevance. Maybe a bigger guy. It'd be nice to see him in a ring with a bigger guy. Someone like 6'4" and above. That's just average, right? And then we might see the Joshua Price fight made. I'm not saying he deserves it. Clearly he doesn't. But then who does? Does Dominic Brazil? Does Charles Martin? Any of these guys that are getting these shots? The whole guys that are going to be fighting for Lucas Browne's title, that they deserve it. Deserving a shot at the title means nothing these days. So David Price, I have a feeling they possibly could work it because I think it would sell. I have a feeling, and the fact that David Price's power is crazy power. David Price could knock out anyone. He could knock out Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua could knock him out. I think that's where the interest in this fight comes. Obviously, Anthony Joshua would be an overriding favourite, but if Price can land that one punch, that's what the dreams are made of. But I think we'll have to see. I don't think he's going to be put in with anyone of any note anytime soon. That's what I think. Why that will be, well, we'll find out later down the line. But I just wanted to move on and just talk about the fact that this fight was at Goodison Park, football stadium fight. It's always an interesting concept. We don't really see it that often in the UK. I think there was one up north. I can't quite remember. Maybe the McDonnell fight was a stadium fight a couple of years back. I can't remember. But we obviously saw Carl Froch versus George Groves, the stadium fight. I actually went to that fight at Wembley Stadium, 80,000, and I wasn't overly impressed by it. I don't think stadium fights particularly work. The atmosphere, it doesn't quite work to me. Like I know David Price was the first on the board of this fight. It was the big Tony Bellew world title fight. So obviously the place was rocking by the time Tony Bellew came out. But for the hours on the lead up, I reckon the atmosphere was probably pretty mediocre. And if anyone knows anything about that, please leave a comment below, because I really want to know what the atmosphere was like at Goodison Park. Because you can, on the TV, it's the TV, but actually being there in Liverpool and finding out what the atmosphere was like throughout the night. Because what I was going to say was that when I was at Wembley, on the undercard, I think Anthony Joshua fought James DeGale, Kevin Mitchell maybe, I can't remember. There was a load of undercard fights, and literally there was no atmosphere whatsoever until 10:10 when Froch and Groves came out. Literally nothing. And the thing was, yeah, at 6 o'clock there might have only been about 20,000, but by 7 and 8 it was 50 plus. And James DeGale, whoever was fighting, you could hear a pin drop. I could have shouted to someone on the other side of the stadium and they would have heard me. And literally, you had the atmosphere was electric for the 20 minutes of that fight. which I always find a bit disappointing. That I don't know if there's a way to build up atmosphere for the other fights to make it more interesting. But it'll be interesting to find out what people thought about the Goodison Park atmosphere, because I know that obviously during the title fight it sounded pretty good. But anyway, again, in addition to that, I just wanted to talk about Tony Bellew. Now, obviously he won his fight, he got dropped in the first round, and then he managed to spark out his guy in devastating fashion a couple of rounds later. But after the fight, he called out David Haye. Now, first of all, he called out one of the cruiserweight champions, which was, that would be a decent fight. But then he called out David Haye. Basically, I can't remember what he basically said, but he called him out. That fight is never going to happen. That fight is never ever going to happen. David Haye's far too big. You got to think David Haye's been campaigning at heavyweight. I know he's had 3 years out, but he's been campaigning at heavyweight for 8 years now. He's been campaigning at heavyweight for 8 years, approximately 8 years. And his last two fights, these comeback fights, he's weighed in around the 225, and he looks decent. It looks like that's the right weight for David Haye. Now, Tony Bellew kind of made the comment, obviously, that David Haye should come back to his natural weight and all this nonsense. Now, all I would say is, go and look at the tapes of Enzo Maccarinelli versus David Haye and tell me that David Haye is a cruiserweight, because David Haye on the night must have weighed 30 pounds more than Maccarinelli, and the size differential of the two guys standing next to each other was ridiculous. Ridiculous. Now, I think David Haye's natural about 225. He could possibly pile another 5 pounds really, get to 230, but yeah, that fight's never going to happen, Tony. For my money, I think David Haye would probably dispatch Bellew. He'd probably get this KO victory. But that's what I think. I think Tony Bellew, he's already done amazing to get that title, and knockout fashion, devastating knockout, brilliant knockout, fantastic, and to come back from a being dropped as well, unbelievable. But he's a fleshy cruiserweight, and David Haye's a massive, muscular heavyweight. This is not going to happen. But anyway, I just thought I'd kind of make those two comments about Goodison Park events, Tony Bellew. And if you've got any comments about that, it'd be great. Be great to hear what you think about who David Price would fight next, and whether he would be an interesting fight for one of the champions. We know he don't deserve it, but would he be an interesting fight? Could he knock? Well, we know he can knock out anyone, but would he be an interesting fight for someone? Is he a step above the British guys? The Whites and Chisora, and the other guys that are obviously in the mix for the British title. We'd say he's probably above that. Well, he's definitely above that. But yeah, so if you've got any comments, I really want to hear from you. It'd be brilliant. Give us a thumbs up if you've liked the video, and subscribe to the channel. So this is Teekosey. We'll see you in the next round.